And we're live. Hello and welcome to a special episode of Hex Therapy Live. I'm your host, Maddie ALLin, with special guest Clay Collins, the Nomics CEO. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Maddie.
I'm so excited to have you on the show because I know that there's been a lot of talk recently in the Hex community about how we're ranked on Nomics. And I have a number of, I think, therapeutic points that I want to bring up to the community. Now, with that in mind, I want to remind people that the point of this show is to be therapeutic. And so I want you to be more respectful than you think you should be in the comments. Be more respectful than I would be, and I'm very respectful. So moderators, if you see people, spreading hate, then go ahead and ban them. This is a special episode where we're going to focus on the issues at hand. And so I'm really excited for everybody to be here. And thanks again, Clay, for coming on. I'm going to go ahead and hit the intro and then we can get started. How about that?
Yeah. Well, okay. I've got a few things too. One is like, I'm super impressed by the community, even though I don't always, like the tone of all of it. I think, in terms of like engagement, the market cap to like engagement on Twitter ratio is unmatched. You guys are like pretty incredible in terms of just the passion. And yeah, my only ask is just sort of like on the tone of the comments. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not looking to dodge any questions. I might not have the answers to some, but there's nothing that I'm asking to be off the table in terms of like, the substance of the question. So we can talk about anything.
That sounds great. I'm excited to get started here.
Cool.
It's from Maddie ALLin of HexTherapy.Live. I like Maddie. Maddie tries to make the world a healthier place. He's a mental health professional. He's done research. There's nothing that a human being could do better than try and heal his fellow man.
Awesome. So there have been a lot of, I think, responses by the community, and I would say people are definitely passionate about where Hex is ranking on your website. Can you give us a little bit of background for people who aren't familiar with what's been going on?
Yeah. So I can kind of walk folks through the through the journey it took me to get here. I saw some, by the way, just as a side note, I saw some comments on a interview I did with RG3 back in the day that somehow I was like dishonest because I was not making contact with the camera the whole time. I'm not a very visual person. I'm much more into like podcasts than visual mediums. So I think it's a little taxing for me anytime where there's a video component, because I have to process that too. So often when I'm deep in thought, I'll just like look away because it's easier for me to get inside my head and sort of wrestle with transitioning like long-term memory to short-term memory so I can recall it. So if you see me look away, that's why. It's not because I'm like trying to dodge the question. I guess there's some theories about if someone looks up and to the left versus up and to the right. I'm not sure what they are. But one of those means you're lying. So you can tell me after the fact if you think I'm lying.
Well, if you're watching the price of Hex go up and to the right, then that's just what it does, right?
Exactly. You guys are crushing it, by the way. And by you guys, I mean myself also. But I'm not as heavily invested as everyone. But yeah, no. So the story was, I went to Twitter back, a few months ago, and I asked a question about volume. And it wasn't a criticism. It was more like I was just curious why volume was so low compared to market cap. And I knew that staking, I guess the journey I went on was I knew that staking was a factor. But then I was looking at Hex.vision and I saw that like only 10% of Hex was being staked. So I was like, why is the volume so low if only 10% of Hex is being staked? And so someone came in, they were like, well, it's because the OA owns a whole bunch of it. And I was like, this is interesting because the way we calculate circulating supply for tokens that are generated by smart contracts on smart contract platforms has us, eliminate supply that's owned by the project or founders. And that led me to the Hex audit, which was just like really fascinating and put a lot of time into that. And then that led us to our, the path that led us to making the exclusions that affected market cap. But I'm with Richard Hart, and I'm with what I assumed was the narrative around Hex, which is that market cap is kind of a bullshit vanity metric. Sorry for cursing. I don't know what your policy is here, but it's a BS vanity metric, and I think everyone who's rich is still rich. So I don't think we're changing that for anyone. But yeah, no, so it led me to the Hex audit. It led me to conversation with Gunther. It led me to conversation with Dev Kyle, and then some back channel with RG3, who I respect quite a bit. And then eventually a very long blog post, which I've gotten a lot of flack for. Like, I guess I'll say the reason I'm here in the first place is not it's not to promote Nomics. I think that Hexagon should go to the website that they feel best represents what they think is accurate data for Hex. At the end of the day, rep whatever site you think most accurately reflects reality, or tells the story that you think is most accurate. I'm here, and the reason why I continue to gauge.
I love that, by the way. You have a commitment to truth, and I know that we all can debate what the truth is. That's something that academics and experts do all the time.
Yeah.
I also see that a lot of people in Hex are becoming experts for the first time on something that is life-changing for them. Yep. And so in a lot of ways, it's intangible until you cash out, or, until you start following your financial plan. But in a lot of ways, and crypto is kind of intangible because it's magic internet money.
Yeah.
But there are other aspects, I think, that people are coming into contact with, this certain version of reality where they're an expert on something. And what I've noticed is a lot of people, they spent months and months, maybe up to a year and a half, understanding Hex. And here you come asking all the same questions we did, and people are jumping on you and freaking out because you don't understand it instantly. And so that's I think it's a product of people kind of having their aha moment and then not being able to remember what it was like even before they really understood Hex.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think I'd say, I was telling you before the show, I've spent maybe the last couple of weeks of my work life thinking nonstop about Hex, both because I, had to write this really long article, and then I was interviewed for the documentary, and then just having to deal with a whole lot of unpleasant messages on Twitter, and also some really nice ones too. I on the whole, I'm very impressed by the core Hex community. Sort of the inner circle of the inner circle seems to really know what they're doing. So I've had a lot of the same questions that everyone else has. The problem is, I think, is that I just probably have a bigger platform. So if someone with like a few hundred followers, asks a question on Twitter, it's not viewed as an attack. Whereas if I ask it, maybe it's viewed as sort of like, like I'm asking a rhetorical question that gets, that sort of leads to some sort of existential opposition to Hex, which I don't have at all. I truly was trying to understand, and rather than going through like hours and hours of live streams, it just seemed like it would be much quicker for me to just ask on Twitter, which is what I did.
So, and we'll get to all the points that the audience is going to be asking about in the comments. I've made a list of some of the points that we can make, but I think that, yeah, really understanding like where the differences and similarities are between, your point of view and what you're doing and what we're trying to do in Hex. Hex, in a lot of ways, is a truth engine. And what you've built, in a lot of ways, is a much more truthful list than I can find anywhere else on the internet.
I
of
appreciate that.
what the scoreboard is. And I wanted to know, do you have any favorite sports?
I play tennis. I like tennis quite a bit and have played that for a long time.
I am not plugged into this world of sports as very much at all, but I know that teams really and fans really care about their team, right? And so in the Hex ecosystem, I see a lot of behavior that's fan-like, and in that sense, it's a different spin on being tribalistic or being maximalistic or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think what the Hex community really wants and respects is when people can update their worldview, and when people can really like have a positive dialogue with each other. And I think that the truth is really something that's more complicated and people are maybe acknowledging. But I also want to, so I want to acknowledge like the technical aspects of what you do, but I also want to sprinkle in, my empathy to both sides. Yeah. Because the Hex community has dealt with a lot of gatekeeping and lying. And if we want to mint people who are believers in Hex, then we're going to have to be patient with them on their journey. And so anybody criticizing and personally attacking Clay, that's not the most effective strategy to teach or to facilitate people on their journey to learn about Hex, just the way we all, just like we all had to learn about it at one point. So,
yeah, cool. I'd say, our philosophy with crypto projects, Hex is by far the most passionate one I've encountered. But, I think I was saying a little bit earlier that, my goal here is always to engage. It's not just shill Nomics. When we first started Nomics, CoinMarketCap had an anonymous founder who I've never seen his face. I don't know what he looks like. I guess he was doxed somewhere in terms of his name back in the day. And CoinGecko wasn't engaging a lot with the community. And we were like the first website to put our phone number on the homepage. And I was, I think I was the first CEO of an aggregator that was like kind of directly engaging with projects. And so our goal from the beginning was to like never cut off ties, no matter how ugly it got. We didn't want to cut off ties with any asset projects, because we wanted to be kind of updated on how things were working. We wanted to stay in the loop. So that's really why I'm here. And while I'll always be here, is, as painful as it can get on Twitter, is I want to always stay in dialogue because, things evolve and there are a lot of different versions in reality, unfortunately, in crypto, because the space is so unregulated. So, when you've got an SEC regulated asset or exchange, the numbers are essentially the numbers unless there's outright fraud, in which case people can go to jail, but you can just perform simple arithmetic. A huge part of what we do on Nomics is spam detection. So, and outlier detection. So, a pretty large exchange the other day, rather than reporting the price of ETH and BTC, they were reporting the price of BTC and ETH, but they claim to be pricing ETH and BTC. So, if we wouldn't have sort of flagged that outlier, our data would look weird. Or if you take, the aggregated price of Bitcoin, if you include Korean exchanges, you'll get a price that's much higher than most people are, than the average person in the average country, will pay. So we need to exclude that. So it's very much the case that on a volume weighted basis, if you include Korean exchanges, the price of Bitcoin is way higher than we're reporting. So there's a lot of different versions of reality here. And I wish there was just one version of the truth, but unfortunately there are a lot of different versions of the truth. And there are decisions that need to be made when you start aggregating up the chain. When you're just looking at like one trading pair on one exchange, and you're looking at the order book data and you're looking at the individual trades, yeah, fine, there's one version of the truth. But the second you start sort of going up the ladder and sort of aggregating data, things get weird, especially in this space, because there's so much crap.
But I thought math was all black and white. I didn't know that there were any problems sorting signal from noise in data. I thought we lived in a perfect world, Clay.
Yeah, so this is actually a really important point, that there's two aspects to methodology for sites like ours, and one aspect is the math, and then the second part is outlier detection. And so there's a lot of websites that publish what their pricing methodology is, right? Like, here's how we arrive at the price of Bitcoin. What they almost never publish is how they do outlier detection. And I would say that outlier detection is at least 50% of the equation. And the reason why they don't publish it is because they have to update it every freaking day, because every time we think we're settled on one way of detecting outliers in this space, someone will find another way to try and sort of cheat the system to kind of go up the rankings, whether it's exchange, volume spamming or price spamming or whatever. So
it's profitable to do that. And so the
is.
Game theory mechanics of cryptocurrency itself dictates that signal to noise detection in CoinMarketCap should be a moving target, extremely difficult to quantify, and be one of the places where the magic internet money touches the real world or the legacy system or whatever. And we get a bunch of garbage in, garbage out. We get a bunch of people arguing about what the reality is, when really what's happening is the methods are evolving because there are billions of dollars at stake. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Google several times per day, they have large algorithm updates, but every single day Google is making updates to the, to its ranking algorithm, because every new day, a new spammer finds a new way to try and cheat the system. And so there's very much like an arms race. So when you think about email, at first, people were just getting CDs filled with email addresses and they would spam everyone. So Google was like, all right, we're going to filter for the word porn and, the P's, and casinos, whatever, Viagra. So anything with those words would get excluded. And then, folks started creating images. So they'd send the email in an image. And then, so Google started, they responded, now they can crawl images. And then, so there's this sort of this cat and mouse game where, every time you sort of plug up one hole, there's another route that someone can take to try and cheat the system. And it's never ending. And spam detection and outlier detection is a huge part of what we do. And by saying this, I'm not saying that Hex, that there's an issue here. I think Hex is trying to spam anything. I will say, though, that there is a reason why no market cap site has the exact same ranking for Hex. And the reason for that is because the supply situation with Hex is complicated. And it's complicated across a number of dimensions. It's complicated in the way that, when you stake Hex, the tokens are burned and then they're reminted. So you've got Hex going in and out of supply. It's complicated because of the amount that's owned by the OA and the way that the OA has sort of sent that to thousands of sub addresses, where it's never moved. It's complicated because we can't have a conversation with the OA about what's happening there.
And that makes it not a security, right? That's what cryptocurrency is, or should be, is something that's not violating the law and at the same time
totally
accomplishing its own mission of being decentralized.
Yeah, I'm not saying these things are bad. I'm just saying why it's hard for us. I'm not attacking the core design. Well, I'm just saying why it's complicated to understand circulating supply.
Your article did suggest that you care about people not getting rug pulled. And so when we talk about any threat model to a certain cryptocurrency. And when we're looking at more than just the numbers that are being spammed, right? And when we're trying to, some people are going to call it like manually adjusting, right? But in a lot of ways, look, I've seen the evolution of CoinMarketCap publishing for the first time in like 2017, 2018, what their criteria were, then them getting bought right by Binance, and then not even following their own rules. And I can really see both sides of that, because I think, you know, there's, again, when we look at why is it that Bitcoin works, it's because of the game theory. And it's because the miners are incentivized to tell the truth.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that they always will, but it means that we can trust, right, the total supply. We can trust certain aspects to the extent that we understand, and that will continue to hold up over time. Catching double spends has changed over time, and now it's a really big business, and governments can see where the electricity is flowing, and they can shut it off. And it's a much different game than when Satoshi started it.
Yeah.
So the nuances, I think, are really important to explore.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that the point of, you know, in the article that, you know, that we were making about rug pulls is that I do think and that didn't factor in, like we were just talking about our criteria. You know, we would rather not see assets where the project owns several multiples of the available liquidity for that asset. So if the project owns, like, let's say 100 million of the token, and there's only 5 million available for liquidity, you know, across all exchanges, that doesn't bode well for a rug pull. But, you know, when I was getting interviewed about this for the Hex documentary, and they asked a really good question. They said, have you ever seen a rug pull like 2 years plus in? And I was like, no, I've never seen that. So I don't think Hex is going to be rug pulled. I don't think that's in the best interest of the OA. So I personally don't think that's going to happen. But I would rather not have to trust that. I'd rather that be a trustless situation, all things, you know, being equal.
Yeah. So it really drills into our understanding of market dynamics. I know coins that have had a more decentralized distribution often get sold off very quickly because there's nobody to hold. There's nobody to be the altruistic centralized player who can do more defensive moves than just hodl like Satoshi. And that matters to the rug pullability of something. The thing that I always land back on is this idea that whoever the OA is, that person or entity more than likely owns billions of dollars of multiple cryptocurrencies, not just Hex, probably right. Bitcoin, probably Ethereum,
definitely ETH,
and Hex, and USDC now, probably too. And so in that sense, we have maybe for the first time in history, a good outlier. We have an altruistic centralized player, because all of the other founders, they have an incentive to rug pull because they have to get paid out somehow. And they haven't shown a long history of waiting and being patient for the market to give them their reward. So when we talk about incentives, and when we talk about miners being incentivized to stop double spends trustlessly, we call that trustless, right? But when there's a centralized entity that has never sold and does not have an incentive to sell, all of a sudden it's like, well, that's a pretty good example of, I think, an outlier that's positive. So we talk about the magic carpet ride being the opposite of a rug pull.
I like that. I like that that little that rephrasing.
Do you ever see a day when Nomics would like update its worldview to include such a strange thing as a magic carpet ride instead of just manually gatekeeping for rug pulls?
Yeah. So I think, rug. So, okay. So what we see often is, like, here's what I struggle with, because I do think Hex is different, right? Like, we're not the main reason we took action here was not because we thought Hex was going to be a rug pull. The main reason we took action was because we were unfairly applying the rules. So, when we add new ERC20 assets,
unfair to who?
We were inconsistently applying our rules. So we were counting the OA for Hex when we don't count the equivalent of the OA for most ERC20 and BEP20 tokens. So we just weren't consistently applying our own methodology in a way that favored Hex.
And to drill down into the specifics, you're talking about suspected project controlled coins.
Yeah. So we'll price any asset when someone comes to us and they're, or, even without involvement from a project, we'll price any asset whatsoever. In order to do market cap, we need circulating supply. Because you can't do it on total supply. For one reason you can't do it based on total supply is that for most projects, or for many projects, total supply is completely uncapped. So like for Ethereum, total supply is, it's infinite, right? So we need circulating supply. And so when a project comes to us and they need, and they want a market cap ranking, we go to Etherscan and we get a list of their, top addresses. And, we ask them which ones are them. And we ask them to explain, like, if there's an address that has like 90% or 80%, or even, just in the double digit percentages, we'll ask them to just kind of like help us understand what all of those addresses are. And the addresses that are, project owned or founder controlled, we'll exclude from circulating supply. So we do that across the board consistently. And so, with Hex, I think we just did it earlier before we started implementing that methodology. And so when we found out about the amount that was owned by the OA, we excluded that. So that's something we're consistent in doing.
Now, have any other coins ever been grandfathered in on that policy?
I'd have to have my co-founder here, not to my knowledge.
Maybe it starts with a B and ends with a it coin.
Okay. So there's the two examples that have come up the most frequently are Bitcoin, and then I thought you were going to say BNB. So yeah, let's talk about this. I think this is a great conversation to have. I think that proof of work chains in general and layer ones probably get more of a pass than I'd like them to have. So the reason why we started doing this with ERC20 tokens and BEP20 tokens back in the day is because you could, without creating a layer one and without kind of having your layer one infrastructure in place, you could just program a bunch of tokens into existence. Like, right now I could go to Binance chain and I could create 1 trillion tokens in like 10 minutes, without having to spin up a bunch of validators and, without much cost. So we started seeing these tokens that had like literally been around for a half an hour, and they were outranking Bitcoin and Ethereum and Hex and others. Like they were just jumping to the top, because if we just blindly assigned the methodology, we'd say, okay, they just minted a trillion tokens and 5 just sold for $1 each. So does the whole thing's worth $1 trillion? Like that didn't seem right. So we saw this,
especially if it's a 13-year-old in their parents' basement creating Joey coin worth $1 trillion. Go on.
Right. So we saw this happening most frequently with assets created on like where they could just be programmed into existence. So you could say that other layer ones are programmed into existence. I think that's accurate. I think what's different is that there's just more of a barrier to entry because you have to spin up validators and because you have to sort of like get this core infrastructure going. So we started first with ERC20 tokens because it was the biggest problem. Like we had hexagons and a whole bunch of other people like just coming in being like, whoops, this is outranking Bitcoin. And it like, I can tell you why. It was an ERC20 token or a BEP20 token where someone just programmed a bunch of assets into an existence and they were like popping up above the others. So
how many do you think have done that ever since you've been operating your site?
Hundreds.
Like if you took all the filters off, where would Hex and Bitcoin rank?
Yeah.
Top 1,000 or not?
There would be at least 40 assets. So the issue is that a bunch of these get rug pulled. So they'll pop up and then they'll get rug pulled and then they'll like go to zero. So I'd say definitely every single day we see these. They tend to not stay there very long because if you've got like, because if you're rug pulling, that goes to zero, or it just there's a bunch of hype around a token at first, and then it dies down over time. So like we've thought about having time as a filter, but I don't think that's the right way to go. But definitely every single day we see multiple assets that would outrank Bitcoin and Ethereum and Hex and others if we just applied simple math, which is why we implemented this. But like we should talk about Bitcoin and BNB when folks want to, or like when you want to.
That sounds really good. I want to make a quick point that we don't really need to go into, but
yeah,
I do believe that Hex will be the first or one of the first really good examples of a coin that's even too big to rug. And so like at some point, the legacy financial system does not let you move around billions and billions of fiat dollars. And that's anti-money laundering, know your customer. Like there's an amazingly tight infrastructure set up to where my bank starts asking questions if I, pull out X number of dollars, where X is even less than 10,000. And so I think that that's kind of an interesting like aside to this that again feeds into incentives. I mean, if we look at, even if there was a bad actor who created a coin that really did have enough demand and long-term thinking and staking that was immutable to the point where it almost became so successful that it wouldn't even be profitable to rug pull. It'd be more profitable to stay in it.
Yeah, I think to me, like just getting technical here and not talking specifically about Hex, I think the ability to rug pull something is, in my opinion, more about available liquidity. So like right now, the biggest Hex pull or the most liquidity seems like it's on Uniswap, and it's the Hex to USDC pair, and there's 36 million of value locked. Yes. So if someone just wanted to sell 40 million, that, Hex would go to zero. Unless I'm misunderstanding that, or there's some nuance I'm missing here. But, I think as a Hex holder, I would love to see, I would love to see that be in the hundreds of millions, if not, but, I'd like to see it at least 1% of market cap available.
I mean, what I care
in the
about
liquidity pools.
What I care about as a Hex holder is the price that I sell at, not the price that the screen tells me minute to minute. And so, I do know that there are pros and cons to having low liquidity, and that when you're rug pulling, you have less liquidity, but also when you have less liquidity, you're able to pump higher, much higher on AMAs, right? Or AMMs, automated market makers, because if somebody wants to buy in, then you have to push the price against yourself, and it's a function of a square. And so literally what the low market cap is doing in Hex is it's actually keeping out legacy whales. It's repelling them. And what that does is it achieves the stated goal of the product from the beginning, was to create new whales. And then we stopped talking about it. But I'm not a whale, but I am a much bigger fish than I ever could have been, right? I was intentionally working a low paying mental health professional job, because that's what gave me purpose in life, was, helping people with their mental health. And I still do that from time to time when I remind people to take their omega-369 and try to say nice things in the comments, kind things. So it's so there is a lot of deep game theory, I think, that's happening here, and in some senses, it's actually beneficial for legacy financial people to look at Hex and say, scam, rug pull, and move on. And then, the people like me who are true believers, who were attracted to Richard Hart's initial videos about self-help, where he helped people quit smoking, quit gambling, quit playing video games, giving better apologies, quitting substance abuse, like all these things, like that was his core audience. So it almost didn't matter if some aspects of Hex looked like a scam in the beginning, because that could have just as well been a design decision to filter in the right people who would become long-term holders.
Yeah. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Richard Hart debates. I think that the content, I think it's pretty infrequent that I hear something that Richard says where I'm like, I disagree with this. I think, I mostly agree with the content. There's a lot of hateful, I don't know. Sometimes, like, I listened to a Richard Hart debate once, and he was just like telling them they were a fucking idiot and stupid and like yelling. And I was like, oh my God, it's going to be hard to sleep after all that. I wish, I wish we could just, I don't know. I wish there was less hateful language, but whatever. I think maybe he was just calibrating to who he was talking to. I don't know. But I think I'm just more moderate in general. I kind of like kind of a more even keel tone, and I think I'm just a little averse to conflict in general.
Oh, I think it's all so fascinating, the kind of psychological deep dives that myself and other psychologically minded community members have made on Richard, because we do have so much data to look at. He has hundreds of hours of videos, and now we've been able to observe his behavior over multiple years.
Yeah.
And what I see is him improving himself. He is committed to not curse. And he's doing that for several months now. It again makes me wonder if there's some coincidence or some brilliant design, because he started off repelling more people, and where I see him ending up is going to be attracting more people. And during that time, he will have attracted a group of people who are already staked long-term, because they believe, despite the methods of his delivery.
Yeah. So I have a theory on that too. I think when an asset is like clawing its way out of obscurity, from the primordial ooze, it's probably helpful to, have flashing countdown timers and affiliate programs and MLM style marketing tactics. But I think as you start to go more mainstream, most of the country is moderate, despite what, Fox News and and MSNBC might lead you to believe, most of the country is kind of somewhere in the middle. We aren't as radical as our politics make us seem. And so I think that, we saw a guy, with a pretty interesting getup and a top hat.
Yes.
And now his haircut's like a little bit like his clothing, and his haircut's a little bit more normal. I think the dialogues are more even keel. And so I think he's probably going from hopefully the Hex community is going to go from one that, needed to be really extreme to sort of bootstrap itself up to one that's going to, be able to appeal to moderates and just kind of like your average person that's trying to save for retirement, who might otherwise be repelled by a really hateful debate.
Another thing is that when I study the history of Hex pre-launch, I know that there was an incredible amount of effort and many brilliant minds working on how to stop a coin from the early adopters becoming the only ones who are wealthy. So how to leave meat on the bone, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that the initial marketing of Hex was maybe not appealing to the majority of crypto users, the mainstream audience. And if it had been, then the price of Hex could have appreciated much more rapidly than it already has. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely the case that at some point the growth slows down, but it slows down in favor of consistency and reliability. So all of these assets have a history, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Hex, of just having incredibly huge gains at first. And, Bitcoin, I think in the last year has done anywhere between 300 to 500%, which a lot of people are making fun of. But I'm like, that's actually pretty good for an asset with, a 10-year plus track record. It's been around for a long time. So, totally. I think that, we're not really competing. I think any crypto asset really isn't competing with other crypto assets. I think it's competing with the traditional financial system. So one of the interesting points that was made about Facebook when it was first started, comparing it against MySpace, was that Facebook could have become what it is today without stealing a single MySpace user, because the size of the total addressable market was the entire world. And MySpace had less than 1% of that. So they could just go and get the rest of the world, not get a single MySpace user, and still dominate. I think the same is true of Hex.
It's interesting that they were the initial marketing was the opposite of that, right? MySpace was for everyone. Facebook was only for people who had a .edu email address. And so being exclusive and being very targeted in your marketing or your exclusivity worked for Facebook. And now they've, come full circle to try to be everything to everyone. And I believe that Hex will do the same, that it started off with a small addressable market and it'll grow organically from there.
Now that's right. I want to make sure before we go though, that we do talk about BNB and Bitcoin, because
Satoshi's coins have not moved. Why are they counted?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things around this. And I'm sure I'll get criticism for it. I'm okay with that. There's a few things here. I think the first one is just around proof of work systems in general, especially when there's not a known pre-mine. So when there's a proof of work chain that has a known pre-mine period, we can look at all the assets that were earned during that designated pre-mine period, and we can exclude them. When there isn't a designated pre-mine period, that becomes harder to do because we just don't have solid accounting. So I think there's a lot of hearsay about Satoshi's coins. It's much harder. Like I invite someone to send me a CSV that shows me the addresses of, Satoshi's addresses with the unmoved coins. And then to just offer any kind of, spurious proof that that this is Satoshi. It becomes harder to do. And I think it becomes less important.
Awesome.
As
I bet somebody will
tokens
do that.
I would love for them to.
And
I would love
look
for them
at this. Look at Clay suggesting that he will update his worldview and that he'll continue to listen to the conversation, to update his data. Wow. I think we should do that too. I think we should be listening to each other and understanding with empathy and respect. Good job, everybody who's being respectful in the comments. Everybody else, I'm ignoring you.
Okay. So I think the first thing is around just kind of proof of work. I think, again, there's a lot said about Satoshi's coins. I think actually in a non-conceptual way, but in a, thinking about a specific company that needs to make specific exclusions based on specific addresses, like that's something we practically have to do. And so we've looked into this. It's not as easy as it looks. I think the second thing about this is that, as the percent, when you think about the OA around 90%, this is less than 10%. So I think, frankly, it's probably the case that if the OA owned less than 10%, we probably wouldn't have taken action, because a piece of what we're doing here is outlier detection. There's probably, I think most people, if we said, all right, the OA owns 99% and users own 1%, should the 99% be counted as circulating supply? I don't think most people would say that you get an accurate market cap if the OA owned 99%. So I think most people would say that there's, yeah.
Let's talk about circulating, because I think that maybe should have an asterisk next to it.
Yep.
Because I think it's being used to say not project controlled and being sold. Because the OA coins have moved, Satoshi's coins have not.
Right.
And so Satoshi's coins are not circulating without an asterisk, and the OA's coins are.
Yeah. So this is about, there's three pieces to market cap. There's a lot of pieces to market cap, but there's price and there's circulating supply. And I think that the question we are asking here is, can you use price discovery in any market? Can you use price discovery? Let's go to the extreme, okay? Can you use price discovery on 1% of the assets to price the other 99%? So if you had 100 shares in a company, one share was for sale, that sold for $1 trillion. Can you say that each other share of the company is worth $1 trillion? I think that holding back supplies is a good way to pump it. So I think there's probably some number between 1% and 99.99% where most people would say, all right, we have enough of this asset in supply that we can trust the price discovery. So I think what we're saying here is that, or what we're saying here is that in general, you should use the amount that users are voluntarily deciding to buy and sell or hold. You should use those assets for price discovery. And if there's an external entity that is preventing not just 10%, not just 50%, but over 80% is locking that up and not making it available for users, can you then say that the remaining supply is an accurate price?
I would respond to that.
That are held.
I would respond to that I benefit as a user from the OA's coins when the OA stalks whales by doing a stake right before and right after another whale or a shark has been doing short-term thinking to put them in check, to get inside their head. We see it on the blockchain because it's transparent. And if
what do you see? Wait, what?
Yeah.
Can you explain that? I would love.
Yeah.
I would love to understand.
So it seems like OA addresses have at times like checked the behavior of another actor in the system, in the sense that it can pull these economic levers that are important to the psychology of shaping whether people buy or sell, right? Because if there's a lot of coins coming out, right? Hex is the only asset that I know of with a transparent future market supply, because we can see when the coins are becoming, going from locked to unlocked at any future day in the system. And so when we've seen short-term whales and sharks, messing with people's heads, right? Because if a user's looking and they see that 1 billion coins are coming out one day, or 100 million hex are coming out one day, they might feel pressured to sell ahead of that, right? Because they're scared that the price is going to dump. And so when the origin address can get in there and check those other whales' behavior, when it can remind them that they're not the biggest fish in the sea, then those whales are more likely to behave themselves.
So wait, I'm trying to figure out what's the concrete tactic that the OA takes. So how would an OA know? And I'm not challenging you. I'm purely trying to understand this.
Yeah.
So what is the OA, what's the behavior that the OA is observing from a whale? And then what are they doing to check that? What's the sort of the tactic that the OA
to let them know that they're there by creating a big stake before and after that other stake.
Oh, so this is staking related, not
another thing that happened was during the big payday, which is hard to explain, but it was really good that was built into the design, because it leaves meat on the bone 15 years from now for the people who get used to living off their interest only. It was a huge surge of interest for the early people. And then if they want to rebuy their T-shares and keep perpetual passive income, the price of T-shares rockets up in the future based on that big payday. And so the big payday was not just a marketing thing. It was actually a liability for the system, because in order to leave more meat on the bone further down the road, when Hex gets more adoption, it opened up the system for traders to come in and mess with the price in the short term. Because if you held just for that one day, I think you got maybe a 20 or 30% bonus. And so the origin address only right at the end, in the last 2 or 3 days before the big payday, did stake 90 or 95% of the total supply. And that caused the percentage to go from a 200% payout for being staked for a year, a few days, to only 30%. And so it wrecked the traders from the bubble that they had created, and it punished short-term thinking, and it punished people who were trying to trade that situation, and allowed them to, again, have their behavior checked. Does that make sense?
Awesome. It does. It does, more or less. I would add to this. I would love if anyone has good. So the data I see on Binance and Binance Chain is mostly from. So one of the design flaws of Ethereum is that you have more analytics on ERC20 tokens than you have on the foundational asset itself. So in Etherscan, we can get all kinds of information about specific contracts. And so, ERC20 tokens are contracts, Hex is a Ethereum contract for now until it's a PulseChain contract, or both. So we have all kinds of analytics on ERC20 tokens. So we get information on BNB that's on Ethereum. What complicates the BNB situation is that Binance is an exchange. So it's hard to tell what's being owned by Binance specifically versus what's being held by an exchange wallet for trading. Another sort of confounding issue there is that most BNB now lives on Binance chain. So, we can get an interesting picture of like what's happening with BNB on Ethereum, but, most BNB is not represented on Ethereum anymore. It's represented on Binance chain, and it's on Binance Smart Chain. So, I think hexagons are going to find that they'll have a lot more information about Hex on Ethereum and on PulseChain, because it follows the EVM model, than they have on the PulseChain asset in terms of holders and stakers and things like that. So it's just going to be interesting how the analytical perspective evolves when Hex becomes multi-chain, and how that differs from Pulse, which is you're probably going to have less visibility on Pulse because it's not, you just have less data on it than the L1 asset on a EVM-based blockchain.
Okay, interesting.
But if anyone has again, I just explained why a screenshot of BNB addresses on Ethereum, that doesn't really help us in terms of like the native B2B BNB asset. So if someone has better data than a screenshot of the ERC20 BNB asset on Ethereum, but if you have like data on the native asset on BNB chain or on Binance chain, happy to look at that.
Now, when it comes to, defining market cap, that's kind of a technical specification of the bigger idea of like, what is crypto, right? And so,
yeah, I hate, so just as a side note, I really we'd love to have a homepage that doesn't have market cap on it. Like when we first got into the space, we decided that we were not going to, for the most part, we weren't going to publish reports. We weren't going to try and be journalists. We weren't going to try and make subjective decisions. And the big chink in that armor ended up being circulating supply. Almost everything on our website is not subjective. Like if you go to sort of the order book and trades on a specific trading pair on a specific exchange, like we really thrive on this raw low-level data. Our homepage, unfortunately, has market cap on it, and the one piece of market cap that's subjective, and I freely admit it's subjective, it's a vanity metric, but is circulating supply. And I wish we didn't have to go to projects and say, help us understand these large wallets and what's going on there, and help us understand which of these is the project and which of these are the founders, and help us understand this. I wish we didn't have to ask that of projects, because it goes against my ethos in crypto. Like I don't want to audit anyone ever. I hate answering those questions. So we have conversations now every week working towards a scenario where we can get something else on our homepage other than market cap rankings. So I would much rather be in a position where we don't have to talk about circulating supply at all, where we don't have to make that judgment, because it's not on the blockchain. It's a subjective decision, and I would love to get away from that subjectivity. I would love for us to deal purely with data that we can get either from exchanges or from blockchains, and that we don't have to get from projects themselves. In part just because it's very inefficient to have to do that and to have that back and forth.
Yeah, maybe in the future you will have a separate page that ranks how kind people are being And then Hexicans can do the right thing and be kind to others and be patient. Hex, it talks a really big game about being patient and longer pays better and all this. And then people seem very impatient when it comes to giving people time to understand and make their own independent assessments and to have differing opinions. I think another thing in my mind that leads me to see Hex as number one already has to do with the property of it trading on decentralized exchanges. We see a de-evolution of Bitcoin from something that was 1 million coins in one wallet or however many Satoshi wallets there were, and then became more and more decentralized as people like Richard Hart bought in at $1 and at $30 and so on. And then today, lots of people buy Bitcoin and hold it on a centralized exchange. And whereas Hex has, I would say 90 to 99% of the volume has traded on this new invention that we call the decentralized exchange that was born around the same time Hex was, aka Uniswap, and the things that have followed. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm of
decentralization in volume or the actual exchange of the asset, does that make something more or less of a crypto?
As someone who holds little Hex, I'd say that I imagine most Hexicans, despite all the talking down of Coinbase, I feel like it would be a net positive for the asset if there was a huge fiat on-ramp. So I think most Hexicans, if you voted, if their vote could determine whether or not Coinbase would list Hex, I think most of them would probably vote for that listing. Maybe not. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But I do, in general, I see decentralized infrastructure as a good thing. I don't think decentralized infrastructure, necessarily makes something less gameable. I think it's just gameable in a decentralized way. But I love AMMs and I love DEXs, and we prioritize DEX integrations before almost anything else. I think the AMM is one of the most important financial inventions of like the last 100 years. I think it's completely game changing, and I think it's one of those things that most people don't like fully understand. Like if you ask the average person who uses an AMM how price discovery happens on an AMM, I don't think they could give you a good answer. I think if you ask most people, how liquidity works on an AMM, I don't think a lot of people are educated there. But I think understanding these things are really, really essential and important. And so I love Uniswap. I love PancakeSwap. I love Radium on Solana. I think there's just I love Serum on Solana. I think there's some really cool stuff happening in that space. And so all things being equal, I'd rather see stuff happening on decentralized infrastructure than centralized infrastructure. I'd rather see, I'd rather see things go that way.
Yeah. And I think, the average person in the world, thinks that Bitcoin is completely anonymous, right?
Yeah,
and
it's not.
It's not, right? But even the word cryptocurrency is very poorly understood.
Yeah.
And so, it makes sense that people are willing to hold their coins on centralized exchanges, which is not the point of crypto. It doesn't having magic internet money is the same thing as having fiat money that's created from nothing, unless it is immutable, unless it's decentralized, unless it has the properties of a cryptocurrency. And so I think it's really hard for us to cope with, being ranked lower because there are these other considerations going on, not just will we be rug pulled when the incentives suggest otherwise, just like Bitcoin won't allow double spends because the incentives suggest otherwise.
Yeah.
And the game theory, but also because, Hex has the most long-term believers that have been verified of any financial product in the world. Number one, Hex, has, is like probably the most popular decentralized, thing that's traded primarily on decentralized exchanges. Those are really strong properties of what a cryptocurrency is and what makes the price go up.
Yeah.
People buying and not selling, people having the right incentives in place and being decentralized. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the big, so I like Bitcoin. I think the issue with Bitcoin and like kind of the irony, and I don't really blame it. I think actually Bitcoin is doing a good job of what Bitcoin was designed to be, which is, I still think it's the most censorship resistant, it's the most resistant to like state actors fucking with it, in general. So I think Bitcoin is really good at what Bitcoin is trying to do. I think the irony of Bitcoin.
Can you point to which thing it's trying to do? Because this is a graph of the use case of Bitcoin over time.
Okay.
And it has been inconsistent. It started off as eCash, proof of concept, then went to cheap payment network, anonymous darknet currency, censorship resistant e-gold, programmable shared database, uncorrelated.
Yeah, the narrative has changed a lot.
And reserve currency for crypto.
Yeah, so I think I don't know. It's hard to say what Bitcoin is trying to do. What I was getting to was that I think the irony of Bitcoin is that it forces a lot of centralization. If you want to earn a return on your investment for holding it, or if you want to earn interest on Bitcoin, you have to rely on centralized infrastructure. If you want to get sort of like any kind of banking services on top of Bitcoin, you have to rely on centralized infrastructure. And so Bitcoin is really cool, I think, as like e-gold, in my opinion. So I think it does a good job of what I want it to be good at. Where it fails is DeFi. If I want to earn interest because I have Bitcoin, kind of sucks at that. If I want to get basic, decentralized banking services on top of that, it kind of sucks at that. But I still have respect for it. It was first, and it sort of what Satoshi did broke open this whole can of worms. And I participated in the Pulse sacrifice, but I also think that the PulseChain is a fork of Ethereum. Like Pulse wouldn't exist without Ethereum, and frankly, PulseChain is a fork of Binance Smart Chain. So I think that it's important to pay homage, just like in academic literature, it's important to pay homage to like what's preceded something, because the total addressable market is much, much larger than the cryptocurrency we think we're really competing with. What we're really competing with is the larger financial system, or the legacy financial system. And so I think it's important to pay attention to that. In terms of these narrative graphs, I don't know what I care most about with Bitcoin is that governments can't fuck with it. But when I want banking services in a decentralized way, I don't go to Bitcoin.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that there are some good, use cases really for Bitcoin, although they've changed. And that kind of also leads me to this, other point about Hex being a finished product, right? Bitcoin needs a dev team to keep updating it, as does Ethereum. So
I think any layer one will, like PulseChain will.
It really is proof of work in the sense that, devs have to keep working, and so do the miners. In Hex, it feels to me like work when I send money to my future self by time locking it.
Yeah.
Delaying gratification feels like work to me. Not selling when I have liquid coins feels like work to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I think Hex can be a finished product because ETH is not, or PulseChain is not. So I think when you're a smart contract that never changes, and it shouldn't, then yeah, in that sense, it's finished. I think that everyone who participated in the PulseChain sacrifice is going to find that PulseChain is going to need to, it's not just going to be done one day, that it's going to need ongoing work and deployments and stuff like that to adapt over time. So I think that store value assets that are smart contracts on top of layer ones that handle a lot of things for it can be finished pieces of work. I think that's probably true.
I know that you're getting a lot of criticism, for even updating your worldview in either direction. But I want to say that I respect that. And just like there is price discovery in markets, there's also idea discovery, right? And honestly, Hex is different today than it was in its first month. There is a community that's been built, a community of stakers, people who believe and who stand up for what they believe in, and who themselves can get feedback about wanting to be the best versions of themselves, and going about educating others in the way that they would want to be educated. When we mint new believers, we might run out of people who respond to us yelling at them, to us saying mean things. And that's where the therapy part comes in, because it doesn't matter whether you're somebody who bought this most recent top in Hex and you're down 50%, or if you're somebody who's become a newly minted millionaire or even much more than that.
Congratulations. I hope you make a lot more. It's been awesome to see the rise.
People need, still need to work on themselves. I know I do. I said something that was untruthful the other day and got attacked by the Hex community. And, I'm not feeling bad about that at all. I'm actually feeling good about it, because I want to practice what I preach. And so when I ask people to be patient with each other, with people who disagree with you, when I ask people to, take criticism as a growth opportunity, to ignore haters, right? And what I end up seeing is that there are a lot of people who are learning how to, deal with the hurt that we've all had, because there are real people being harmed by CoinMarketCap. There are real people being harmed by the legacy financial system, by inflationary pressures that come and rob us and use our money for, wars, etc. There's a lot of predatory capitalism going on these days, and that includes cryptocurrency. I absolutely love a particular author on Medium called Concoda, who did a deep dive into crypto, believed in it at first, and now speaks against all of the scammy behavior that happens, the Elon Musk pumping and dumping everything, the different predatory forces that are at work in a market that is more free than the legacy system. And so it's really going to take, I believe, us as the people who are involved in cryptocurrency, who are building something that can make the world a better place. Hex is already built, but now the building is happening at the awareness level, at the onboarding level. And I know that that we have a lot of work to do, but that also I'm really proud of the Hex community and how we've stuck together, how we've been able to tolerate each other's differences. And so those are just some of my thoughts.
That's awesome. I think, so Hex might be a finished work, but Nomics is not. And I'd like to think that we're open to new information. It's a lot easier to parse through it, when it's a little bit cleaner. But there's, I mentioned earlier that we're trying to get away from a market cap sort on our homepage. But every day we're updating things. Today, one of the things we updated on Nomics is we can now price any asset. So before, we could only price assets when they were quoted against specific quote currencies. So if it was quoted in BTC or Ethereum or a stable coin or a handful of other coins, we could price it. And now we've found a way to sort of iteratively loop through pricing, and so we can price at anything, regardless of whether or not it's in one of our blessed quote currencies. So we're changing things all the time. And I think that what's different about crypto data than traditional financial data is the amount of outlier detection we need to do and the amount of spam detection, and that's always in flux. So I hope that
how do you compete? How do you compete with people who can make billions of dollars out of nothing? Where do you get your funding?
Yeah, we are. Okay, so I can answer any and all of these questions. First off, I'd like to say on the record in front of everyone, we are in zero conversations with Binance about acquiring us. Binance has given us no money, not in the form of advertising, not in the form, like in no way, shape, or form have we received any money from Binance. And in fact, I don't know why Binance would buy us. They spent I believe around 400 million for CoinMarketCap. And so I just don't know why they would sort of like duplicate their IP and purchase another player in that space. So I can say definitively that to my knowledge, the only interaction we've had with Binance is around the interview with CZ, which I did back in the day on the podcast. So I communicated with their PR team in the lead up to that. And then around, during the interview. And then after that, I communicated with their PR team. And the only time I've spoken with CZ is not where, I guess, according to the meme, we had sex and then he asked me to do a favor for him. But so I spoke with him on the podcast, and that was the only time I've spoken with CZ. In terms of funding for Nomics, yeah, it's
you got paid off by PulseChain, right?
PulseChain did run ads. So they ran like $10,000 worth of ads on Nomics. And so we have received some funding or not some funding, but PulseChain was a customer. And so, we appreciate that.
Has Binance been a customer?
Binance has never been a customer. They're not a customer of our data, and they're not a customer of our ads. And that's the only two ways that we receive funding. So Binance has never given us any money.
How do you deal with the conflict of interest there between wanting to list PulseChain and getting paid off $10,000 by them for in exchange for advertising that was probably well worth it?
Yeah, I don't really see that as a conflict of interest. I respectfully, $10,000 is not a
lot of advertising money.
It's not a significant chunk of our annual revenue. So I just wouldn't say that rises to a place of being a conflict of interest. I'll tell you what we're more motivated by than anything else. We are more motivated than anything else by a desire to list every crypto asset before our competitors. So when I say we want to list PulseChain assets before everyone else, that's just our mission as a company to do that. That's not like preference to PulseChain or anything like that. So, but we will list as soon as someone gives us an API for an AMM or an exchange on PulseChain, we'll list it. And I think PulseChain, I'm looking forward to seeing the community grapple with PulseChain, because PulseChain is going to have a lot of the things that traditionally have been rallied against. So people have sort of spoken ill of making money on volume. There's going to be AMMs on PulseChain where people are making on volume. They're posting liquidity and they earning interest on that,
but not centralized exchanges.
Sure.
Well, I guess people could encourage leverage trading and build whatever they want on top of this, but it's not. But again,
it's just a different
OA
product.
can come in and punish bad behavior. Yay.
PulseChain is going to have it's a decentralized layer 1 EVM. So there's going to be hacks on PulseChain. It's not a flaw of PulseChain. It's going to be a flaw of the contracts written on PulseChain. So there's going to be hacks on PulseChain. There's going to be people making money off liquidity on PulseChain. There's going to be all kinds of things that come with a decentralized programmable layer one. And that's just sort of part of the beauty of the chaos of the space. And I think that's great. But yeah, we want to list the PulseChain stuff before anyone else. And hopefully we'll keep on evolving and, get better over time.
Interesting. So can we talk about staked coins and how those are circulating or not?
Yeah, let's do it. So I'll tell you the theory there. So I feel like that's hopefully, I don't know, we got attacked for this, but like with Solana and Ethereum and probably Pulse, I don't know for sure how it's going to work. But, with a lot of these proof of stake blockchains, when you stake an asset, it doesn't get burned and taken out of circulation. So
because it's reversible shortly after that. It's
right.
not, it's almost kind of like providing, well, it's not really like providing liquidity, but it's like you're just, so what is the point of locking if it's not immutable over time? I'm asking, like,
oh, right.
Why do they incentivize people to lock if you can just unlock anytime?
Well, there's the you get penalized if you can unlock at any time, right, with Hex, but you get penalized for it. Or you're saying, like, why do Solana and Ethereum do that?
Yeah. Just because they wanted to duct tape some behavior on top to, like.
I think it does, even though you can unlock at any time, I think it does encourage holding. Like, I am more likely to hold Solana if I can generate a return from holding it, so I think it does incentivize it, but it doesn't incentivize it to the same extent that Hex does. So, Hex is improved on that or incentivized holding more than these other assets have.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it comes to price discovery, because when I make a 15-year stake and now for quite some time into the future, weeks, months, or years, I can't even get my principal back. That seems immutable to me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So the idea around, like, the reason why we added staked coins to Hex's circulating supply, even though that sounds a little bit counterintuitive or like the opposite of the spirit of circulating supply, it was to be fair, because if you're staking ETH or you're staking Solana, that's still part of circulating supply, because you have a real user with a real wallet who's like holding it. So
that goes to total value locked, essentially, right?
Yeah,
that's
each supply isn't going up or down when, like, if someone, or like Solana, if someone goes and let's say someone owns half the Solana and they stake it, the supply doesn't get cut in half. It's just in a state that is staked. Whereas in Hex, if you stake, the tokens get burned, converted to T shares, and then they reappear later. So we didn't want to penalize Hex's circulating supply because people are doing what they're supposed to do with Hex, which is stake it. So I don't know, what's your opinion? Like, do you think we should have done that? Like, I had someone come to me and they said, "Hey, I own these Hex. They're in my wallet. I staked them, and so, like, why should you treat these staked Hex as if I don't have them, when I can get them back at some point in the future? Like, they didn't disappear. So why are you treating them like they disappeared?" So I don't know, like, what's your opinion? Should we include staked Hex in part of the circulating supply, or do you think that should be removed?
I'm going to give you a wild answer.
Okay.
Because I think it's going to speak to, like, my core opinion on the whole matter.
Yeah.
And I think that they should be counted so that you can manually adjust Hex later on, further down the list, so it can rise again from the ashes. Because listen, Clay, I would not have become a Hex YouTuber, and I would not have built my own T-share app. I would not have done any of the things I'm doing now, which are bringing my life so much meaning, slipping in reminders for people to take their omega-369 to pump up their prefrontal cortex and use self-care and positive self-talk, I wouldn't be able to have such a huge audience of 5,000 people who really care about crypto and self-improvement if CoinMarketCap had not gatekept Hex, because that's what fired me up enough to get involved. And here I am a little bit over a year later, and I've every week for the past 53 weeks, I've done HexTherapy.Live on Thursday nights. And for 43 weeks now, I've done Quant Gang, which is a 5-hour show every Tuesday night.
Damn, that's a marathon.
We don't run out of things to talk about because Hex and the macroeconomic state of the world and everything in between are such important topics. And so I see a silver lining to any disagreement that people have in the visibility of Hex, because I believe that at the end of the day, that allows a conversation to happen after the anger dies down. It allows people to educate others and to cause learning to happen. And that's the only way that we mint new believers. And that's even the anger can be productive because we get a chance to see our own behavior, to get feedback on it, and to not become what we're criticizing against. So for example, when people in the comments say, oh, I'm going to take this out on Nomics by leaving a fake review or something, like, you don't punish what you're calling dishonesty with more dishonesty. Like that doesn't make the world a better place. What makes the world a better place is like being patient with Nomics and with the community and engaging in these types of conversations where Clay is he's volunteering his time, right, to hear me out and to bring more clarity to the situation, to get a greater understanding. He's even given people the opportunity to send data his way in order to update his model on Bitcoin, on Binance Chain, and any other asset, I believe, as well, right? And so the reason why Hex was redefined, because circulating, it should have multiple asterisks next to it, and does probably in the fine print. Like, the reason why Bitcoin didn't get adjusted at the same time is because people don't update their worldviews on every aspect of life all at the same time, right? Clay has done a lot of research and he's demonstrated that we need to be patient.
Cool. Well, let's stay in dialogue. Keep on email. If you have data, like real data, actionable data, email us at support@nomics.com, and we'll look into anything. We'll respond to everyone. And if you don't like the way we've responded, hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Clay Collins. So I think regardless, like, it was kind of sad. I saw someone tweet the other day. They were like, "Take that, Nomics! Hex is back in the top 10." I was like, "That's great. That's fantastic. I hope it gets as high as it can possibly be."
Can I ask you another question? On
go for it.
Where you stand. So, the thing that attracted me to Hex was the opportunity to do a Bitcoin free claim. I was at the technical, learning phase that I needed to be at. I had, created my own Bitcoin full node. I learned how to program in Python to do it. It took me a whole summer.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
So I had learned that. And then I was like, what's the next thing I can learn? I started importing ASIC miners from China and selling them on eBay. Wow. Made like a tiny profit for a little while. Oh. Imported physical Satori Bitcoins that had 1,000th of a Bitcoin on them, underneath a really cool collectible coin seal thing, and imported those and sold them on eBay and stuff. And then I was like, what's next? Oh, learn how to do this complicated signature thing in my Atomic wallet or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so that was that's what got me interested in Hex. What made you want to put money into Hex?
Yeah. So I'd say I don't have you know, the same level of conviction as like maybe as you. But I saw an interesting founder in Richard. Like I had heard his debates and some of his conversations prior to Hex. And, I always found his points to be like well-made and enjoyable, and found the conversations engaging. So I had followed Richard, and then, people would call the pickup artist community a self-help community. Other people think it's a bunch of scammers, but I saw his top hat and his get up, and it reminded me of some people I knew in the pickup artist community. And so I had asked Richard, like on Telegram, like, hey, are you part of this community, or were you? And he was like, yeah. So that was another just sort of like point of connection. And then I saw the marketing, and I have a background in internet marketing. And I have a love-hate relationship with internet marketing. I think scarcity-based marketing or takeaway-based marketing, where there's flashing countdown timers and this goes away at this point in time and you've got to get in early, and then affiliate programs and MLM. I think those things work, but I think that they also come at a real kind of psychological cost. But I saw what he was doing, and I thought, this is the first crypto asset I've seen that uses a style of marketing that I really understand, where there is sort of like a guru, benevolent God leader type figure that is sort of at the center, where there's, centralized leadership and centralized ownership. And so if I look at a portfolio of crypto assets and I'm trying to diversify across success strategies, I'd say one extreme is Bitcoin, where there's an anonymous leader, where progress is like, very slow, where there's no DeFi. I think there is a lot of value in that. And then you've got Ethereum with a larger attack surface where it's programmable. I think there's value in that. That probably has, I'd say Vitalik's influence is somewhere in between like Richard's and Satoshi's, or I don't know, maybe that's debatable. But I definitely, if I was sort of diversifying across strategies in crypto, I saw what Richard was doing as like having a place in this diversification strategy. So that's how I came to it. I also enjoyed the free Bitcoin claim. That was nice. I took advantage of it and have, made a decent amount of money through that. But I still think like I would never tell anyone to write Hex off. People have come to me and said like, would you invest in Hex? And my answer is I don't tell anyone to invest in anything who who I'm not okay with them sleeping in my house if they lost everything. So that's my philosophy. But what I always say is, look, I'm not even going to tell you to invest in Bitcoin. However, I would not write off Hex. I think Hex has a huge potential upside. But I've just had less experience. Like there's, Hex has been around for 2 years, and I'm interested to see how the strategy plays out. I'm curious how dependent it is upon a figurehead. I'm curious how the OA plays out, and so I'm probably just still a little bit on the conservative side, but still optimistic, and will probably always have some Hex in my portfolio as part of this diversification of growth strategies for crypto assets approach.
Have you staked any percentage of your Hex?
I have, yes.
Have you done any Quattro Cinco stakes?
I don't know what that is.
So 5, 5, 5, 5.
Oh, I have not done any for that. No, I've not done any for that period of time. That is a long time in crypto. So for me personally, that's too long for me. I definitely have done ones that are longer than a year, but I haven't done any 5, 5, 5, 5s.
if I sent you some like small amount of hex, would you be willing to stake it for Quattro for the maximum duration?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, totally. I will do anything with free money.
It's really fascinating to see the amount of time that people have committed to holding hex is longer than the amount of time that Bitcoin has been in existence.
Yeah, and several multiples of how long hex has been around.
It's also
crazy.
Really cool to see how the compound interest curve looks at the, that far down the line. There was a presentation at the first Hex conference, which I hosted online at the beginning of the year in January. We had a group called Kryptosparbach, which they invented. This word in German means a crypto time deposit and or a crypto like savings account. And they're actually touring the United States right now. But back in January, they did an excellent presentation of what the power of the compound interest is in the hex system and made some predictions that have played out accurately over the past year. We're going to be having our second online hex conference again in January, coming up here in just a couple of months. And I'm going to be doing lots of videos, actually creating a separate channel for the hex conference. But I know that, that's going to be an opportunity for people to come maybe and even present like, what do you think the most important parts of hex are in terms of people having expertise, people educating themselves, and really trying to find ways to explain and discover how hex is different and how we can accurately represent that. I know that when I was joining Abit and Patrick on their tour, now, have you heard of the hex tour?
I have not.
So these guys took it upon themselves because they became suddenly wealthy from being early investors in hex. I mean, ALLin is the kind of guy who was such a strong believer in hex that he lived in his own unfinished basement and rented out his house for Airbnb. So he was living in like really bad conditions, like eating beans and rice all day so that he could save what little money and put it into hex. And now, of course, he's a multimillionaire. What does he choose to do with his wealth? Well, he's spending it on putting on workshops all around the United States to give a PowerPoint presentation on why he thinks hex is so important. And so I've joined him. I joined him in St. Louis, in Chicago, and then Columbus the last 3 weekends before this past one. And I'm going to be flying out to Albany here pretty soon. And then they're going to be continuing up until the March when we have a physical hex conference. But it's really inspiring to see what they're doing for the community and how they've increased the education that's out there and been modeled, taking a data-driven approach, I think is something that a lot of us can agree that we respect.
Cool.
So
that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of really awesome aspects to the hex community. I definitely think it's like, it's among the strongest communities in crypto. Certainly on a like market cap weighted basis, I think it's definitely the strongest. So that's incredibly impressive. And another reason why I think that's another reason to be bullish about hex.
So to summarize, can you tell me in what ways do you think hex is better than Bitcoin?
Oh my God, I'm not. Okay, yeah, no, I could do this. All right, I think, I wouldn't, if I wanted to earn interest on my crypto holdings, definitely, I think hex is a better way to do that than the centralized infrastructure you need to do that with Bitcoin. So that's sort of the headline there. I'm sure you could list like hundreds of other ways, but that's what I would say.
I like headlines because they're simple and they don't give people information overload.
Okay.
And getting trustless interest is like, that's a super good value proposition these days, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think that the second you get onboarded into crypto, your tendency is to want to do all your financial stuff within this universe. And so, despite what I think is a huge strength with Bitcoin, which is how long it's been around, and I think there's very good arguments that it is sort of the most kind of state-resistant, censorship-resistant asset. There's a lot you can't do with it. So I think it's really good at a very narrow use case. But there's a variety of other assets. I'm definitely a believer in the multi-coin universe. I like to not have my eggs in any one basket. And I do like to diversify. And so I think there's a lot of interesting things that are happening across the cryptosphere. I think Hex is one of them. So that's where I come out on all this.
Right on. Yeah, very, very good. I appreciate that. There was
Cool.
one other question I had, but I can't remember it right now.
I had a question for you too. We're just paused in this a little bit, but what was I going to ask you? Anyway, I'll follow up, I guess.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope that this interview has gone all right for you.
Yeah, it's been a good conversation. I really like the way you approach things. I think you're a positive force in the community. I would encourage the community on the whole to be a little bit more encouraging of folks who are taking a kind of a diversification strategy and see some interesting things about Hex. I think that's part of, in my opinion, how Hex can go mainstream. I'd say, a large amount of institutions that hold Bitcoin are holding it as part of a diversified strategy. So I think to the extent that, to which it's like an all or nothing thing, I think extreme views attract extremists. And I think there's a lot of moderates out there like us who, are more attracted to moderate messaging. And so I'm not saying that has to be the only way, but I think that as long as there's a place for sort of like moderates and people who have a diversified approach to sort of like slot into the community, as long as the community will allow that in some fashion, or there's a lane that they can slot into, I think that's a positive thing. And it's going to be good for the overall community. And I think the more conversations that allow for nuance and subtlety and extended conversations over time and sort of like long form exploration, I think that's good. I think patience is good. And I think, allowing for the evolution of thoughts and perspective over time, I think that's also a good thing. So I really like how you're coming at this, and it's also how I approach life. I also share a psychology background. I started a PhD in developmental neuropsychology right after I finished my undergrad work. So I enjoy the psychology approach, and I think it's an interesting lens through which to view life. So I'm overall down with what you're doing, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on here.
Thank you. I'm looking at the live stream comments and wondering if we can keep going for just a little bit longer.
Sure. Let's, if we could, wrap up at the end of the hour, that would be
perfect.
That'd be good.
Okay. That sounds great. Now I guess some people are asking for more clarification on kind of like how the definition of circulating is really working with Bitcoin, that there's still an unfair principle. It's not being applied to everything. And you address that by saying, send me the wallet addresses. And is there anything else you wanted to add to what I really want to know is
Yeah.
what is the criteria now and going forward? How can, is there any way we can get our definitions clear, be on the same page in the future? If Hex goes up to number 1, is it going to be manually?
Are the goalposts going to change? Yeah. So I definitely will agree that layer 1 proof of work assets in general are harder to audit than smart contracts where you can instantly program a bunch of tokens into existence. So I think that's true. We'll do our best to look into Bitcoin. It's not going to change the market cap much. It's definitely not going to change the rankings. But we're happy to look at it and make adjustments there. I think it's really hard to prove Satoshi's coins. And everyone was, people were proof of work mining back then. So I don't know, we're not going.
Well, it's really hard to prove the OA coins too. When it comes down to it, the audit was looking mostly at the size of transactions, which isn't definitive.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, when I guess,
did you know that?
Did I know what?
What the definitions are in Gunter's Hex audit?
I did. Yeah, I've looked through it. Yeah. So again, because we see the most amount of spams and scamming and rug pulls in ERC, programmable ERC20 tokens, that's definitely where the most of the scrutiny is. That's absolutely fair. And so I agree with you. So when we see situations like the OA where there's one address that it went to, and then there's thousands of sub addresses where it's never moved, it looks like an intentional move to try and obfuscate the fact that there is centralized ownership of the asset. That's what it looks like. So in those situations where we try and audit what's happening and figure out what's happening, if we can't communicate directly with the project, we tend to take a more conservative guess.
Which is a double-edged sword, because if you could communicate with them, then it would not pass the Howey test, and it would be not as much of a true crypto.
I'm not a legal expert. I would say if someone with a Proton Mail address who actually was the OA, could communicate and help us understand supply, that would be absolutely welcome.
But then people would expect that future work, and that makes it, that's one of the legs of
but they already are expecting people expect the OA to not stake so they can get higher interest rates. So there's already a form of that happening.
The
right?
OA actually, that's a misunderstanding that I held for a really long time. So when we look at the actual code in the Hex contract, the OA is already staking the ideal amount of 12.5% or whatever mathematically the perfect amount is, because if the OA were to stake more, it would take interest from itself. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of game theory that does keep the system regulated and does prove that we can expect without having trust and without having somebody controlling that, without making it a security. Why would we make Hex a security when it's so good at not being a security?
But you're not making it a security or not, right? The OA is, yeah. I mean, so you're telling me that you don't expect to benefit from actions taken by the OA? Because it sounds to me like you said you were. I'm not trying to catch you into something, but it sounds like the narrative is that the OA is doing things that benefit us. And so all I'm saying is, if the OA can continue to do that and have an anonymous conversation with us through a Proton Mail address and help us understand the supply better than Gunther's spreadsheet, then we'll go with that. Happy to do that. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I can have expectations based on game theory, but that's different than having expectations for a business legally, right?
Yeah, I'm not a legal, like, I don't have an attorney degree, so I
Sure,
guess
yeah.
I my impression of the Howey test would say that, like, the OA communicating with us in an anonymous form to help us understand circulating supply, in my non-legal opinion, as someone with no law degree, is that it wouldn't violate that. It would just help us understand the data a little bit better. But I could definitely be wrong about that.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, the fact that the OA can defend the system, like, if that's what the game theory, right, is asking for, or that's what the system needs, then that is a really complicated nuance that I think is beneficial. I think that that's a better crypto model, is to have an altruistic actor who never sells and who, can go in and, I guess, because here's what would happen if the OA didn't own so much of the supply, right? If the OA didn't own 90% of the supply, then we could have 90% of people staked and the APY would not be competitive, right?
Yeah, because that's the way the contract, like, it feels to me like Hex was programmed in a way to require the OA in order for it to work. And so, like, if it were up to me, that supply would just be burned. Like, what the 90, like, if the OA burned or sent to a burn address most of the tokens, then everyone would get their interest, users would get their interest, and I don't know, not much would change. But maybe it does need centralized ownership. I'm not an expert on these things.
Sure.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
Do you, like, I guess I was surprised. Like, it feels like the narrative around Hex is that I quote in my article, I quoted Richard Hart, who, like, says over and over and over again that market cap is a stupid vanity metric and it doesn't matter. Here it is. Market cap is a silly made up number and always has been. Only the price you can sell at matters. So what's your opinion of market cap? Is it stupid? Does it matter? Does it not matter? Is it much ado about nothing? Like, we're just trying to find, like, I wish we could put something on the homepage, except a bunch of our competitors have tried something other than market cap on their homepage and, like, have failed miserably. But we need an entry-level view through all of this. Like, do you think market cap is important or not? Like, do you care?
Yeah, that's why I'm here, right? Like, that's what got me started with streaming. And so I think it really is important. And it's when I had an experience just a couple of weeks ago where I was in Columbus, which has, like, the second largest university in the country. And I was at a nightclub that my friend owns, and we were doing a little event there. So we were passing out business cards that said Hex on them. And there was a crowd of young men who came and wanted to talk to me. They wanted to learn more because they were excited about crypto. They had heard of NFTs. One of them whipped out his Coinbase account that had, $1,000 in it. And he was pointing out, look, if I put $10 in Bitcoin, it's not going to make me a millionaire. And he was thinking a market cap, showed me the coins that he was speculating on that, also aren't going to go anywhere because necessarily because they have unlimited supply and they don't have good game theory. So in response to this, I said, oh, well, check it out. Here's CoinMarketCap. Look, Hex is at number 201. Why is it at 201 when the market cap is so high? And the guy was like, whoa, yeah. Like, tell me more about Hex, like, that makes sense to me, right? Mm-hmm. So the gatekeeping narrative, it helps us to onboard people.
Interesting.
But there are lots of other pitches. That's not our only pitch. And so so the reason I did not take them directly to Nomics was because Nomics is not, 2-3 weeks ago was not showing Hex super far down the list. It was showing it in the top 3, which would lead some people to say, oh, I I'm not going to turn $10 into $1 million, even if they still could. Even if we look at the chart of Bitcoin and Hex is on the footsteps of history.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a significant percentage of people that saw Hex at number 3 on Nomics and thought, all right, so if it just doubled twice, it's going to be bigger than Bitcoin. And I don't believe that. I definitely think it helps price appreciation. I agree with you that I think that a Hex with room to grow is a Hex that attracts people who are, it's just going to attract more investors. Like I had a friend and I told him I did tell him not to buy SHIB. So I will tell people not to buy assets. I won't tell them to buy assets, but they were interested in getting to the space. He was like, I'd like to buy Shiba Inu because I think this thing can really moon. And then I'll take those profits and I'll put it into Bitcoin and Ethereum. That was his strategy. And the idea there was that he's not likely to 10x his money on Bitcoin in the next year, but Shiba Inu could definitely do that. So I think there are people who, some room to grow is like, that's an appealing thing to them. So I see that point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, I am not like some people in the audience who is going to get mad that I referred people to Nomics, and now Nomics is, updating their worldview and giving Hex the chance to, rise again in the rankings. I'm not going to get mad at that because I've educated the people that I onboarded, about what really matters. And just because there were some people that I used the market cap pitch with in order to onboard them there, and then teach them even more about what to look for and what really matters, right? The conversation kept going. In the same way, there are lots of other ways for me to onboard people that don't involve it. And so I think that at the end of the day, you being independent and you coming to your own decisions about how you're going to count circulating, because circulating is not simple.
Yeah.
It's what you're really measuring is circulating and kind of the reputation of that, or like what to filter out, who's trying to game the system. And look, if Hex looked like it was trying to game the system, again, that's going to benefit the people who believe.
Yeah.
And so when people are getting upset, I think they just need to be patient.
So I can speak to the moving of the goalposts and stuff. Like if
Please.
I think that's a good point. So, as an entrepreneur, I've unfortunately had to be involved in layoffs, not at Nomics, but at a past company. And the approach that most people who manage companies that get pretty large, I mean, we had almost 200 people at one point. But the approach that people take with layoffs is that when you do layoffs, you should cut as deeply as you possibly can because you don't want to have to ever do them again. Because it's really harmful to the psychology of a company to have to lay people off. And so when we were looking at Hex, again, I can't say that we're never going to, that Nomics is not going to evolve. But what I can say this is that, based on our inability to look at, to communicate directly with EOA, we went for the largest definition of circulating supply, or like, we counted a whole bunch of stuff as belonging to the OA that looked like it probably belonged to the OA. So I just don't know what we'd cut from circulating supply in addition to that. So I think
coins, they can't be sold.
Yeah, so we added those back in. We added. So the only thing I can think of that we would cut is the Hex that's staked. But we just added that back in. It would be really weird for us to keep on like adding that in, removing it, adding in and removing that. So I can't see a scenario where we cut more due to the OA. I can't envision it. maybe there's something that we don't know or something, but I doubt I just can't see us making changes that cut circulating supply more. I think we took I think we took the largest, possible definition there. So yeah, I just don't. I don't see it.
I don't know. I predict that you'll probably remove the staked coins once you keep thinking about it and learning more.
Do you think we should? I mean, you said you thought we should. Okay. Yeah, I think to maintain parity with like Ethereum and others, we should keep it. But I also hear the argument. It's partly definitional.
I mean, it's really the whole idea of circulating is really interesting because it's like, do I want coins circulating? No, I want coins to be hodled by everybody except for me. I want to be the only one who can sell, and I want millions and millions of people to buy only my coins and not everybody else's, right? Like that's what makes the price go up. And so we get our signal to noise really messed up when we've got all these bad actors who can create magic internet money. And, there are teams of engineers that are trying to get around your rules. Right now, there are teams of scientists literally working around the clock to try to figure out how to game your system. And you are the one who's having to deal with that. And you are not funded by an unlimited amount of magic internet money.
Yeah.
Right?
No, we're not. No, we're not. We're definitely, we get most of our money. People think it's from advertising. It's not. Advertising is like a small fraction. It's definitely less than a third of the revenue we get is from advertising. The vast majority of it comes from data sales. And most of the people that buy our data, if this goes to our incentives, most of the people that buy our data are not interested in market cap rank. They're mostly interested. Okay. No, they're mostly interested in like the raw, the very raw stuff. Like what is like, hey, can we get minute order book snapshots, or can we get every trade on every trading pair on Uniswap? Like that's what most of our customers care about. They don't care about our subjective opinions. Like if you're a hedge fund, you don't care about our subjective opinions. What you care about is, can I get the most granular data possible with the highest frequency as possible, with as much history as possible, with as much coverage as possible? That's what you care about. So most of our customers and how we're incentivized is we're incentivized around coverage. I think we probably have like more of the tax providers as our customers than anyone else, because if you are mining a fork of Zcash, and you need to declare that for your taxes, then your tax provider has to price that, and we have more assets than anyone else. So they care a lot more about pricing than market cap. Tax providers don't care about market cap. Hedge funds don't care about market cap. For the most part, institutions that are investing are manually picking what they want to invest in, and they don't care about market cap. They're making their own independent valuations. A bunch of them own Zcash. Zcash isn't anywhere in the top crypto assets. So we're just not heavily incentivized to manipulate market cap, much to the opposite of the narrative that this is all to make money. Like I honestly don't understand how we would make money by trying to screw over Hex. I can't. Like I can't get my mind there. I'm trying to figure out how we'd make money by changing the rank of Hex, and I just can't see it. If anything, if you're onboarding people onto Hex, we've got this really passionate community of Hexkins that used to love us and would point us to their website, and now we don't have that. So I'd say if anything, we just lost stuff. So we were probably working against our self-interest. Rather than enhancing it,
which is why I believe you that you're doing your best to sort out the data and to understand everything. So I know one thing that just occurred to me is I think the audience is asking too, would you be willing to go on with Richard at some point to discuss this?
Yeah, I think the issue with going on with Richard, I think if he agreed to There's a couple things I don't like about how he debates. Like, so I've studied neurolinguistic programming, and I know Richard has too. And there's a lot in his debates of like NLP dominance techniques, where like the whole point is to like use certain psychological techniques to try and shut people down. I'm not a very experienced debater. I'm not good at it. I'd say if it was, if the debate, so I don't even know, like, I don't even know what Richard thinks about this. Like, does he agree? Does he disagree? It sounds to me like he doesn't give a fuck about market cap ranking. So I don't know if there's anything to talk to Richard about. I don't know if he wants to talk.
Yeah, I think I have no idea if he would want to do an interview, but I think that in general, I've seen him care and comment about what hexagons are caring and commenting about. And I also was not sure how it would go when I had the opportunity to do an interview with him, because I had seen him really tear people apart before, and I was going to do something at the Hex conference when I scheduled a talk with him. I was planning to pitch the community the idea of Hex NFTs, which Richard had been speaking out against for several months at the time. He called them effing thanks things and silly JPEGs and stuff. And I wanted to go on and see if I could, change his mind or kind of propose this idea of not NFTs as a gambling mechanism, but NFTs as a way to like reward people for doing the right thing, from the therapy perspective. For example, if you do a Quattro Cinco stake, you can get a Hex badge that says that you're the most long-term believer of all time.
Yeah, I own a Richard Hart NFT where he's wearing the little captain hat and it's like 3D and spinning around, and it looks like
cool.
Like one of those toy things. So I bought one of those. I'd speak with Richard if I thought there was something to.
He was very nice, and I loved going on with him, and I got to see that the really positive side of him, which I think people really also appreciate when he tears up somebody like that scammer that was scamming influencers out of their Bitcoin.
Yeah.
What's that guy's name?
There's probably a lot of them.
No,
I don't know which one.
I mean, Richard ended this guy's career because he was
I know who you're talking about. I saw that. Oh,
yeah. He had stolen coins from BitBoy and everybody else, and was like,
yeah. I'd say if there's something,
Alex Saunders.
If I thought there was something substantive to talk about with Richard, where like it would edify people, and if we could agree to some ground rules, then I'd be happy to talk with Richard. I do like the self-help videos he created back in the day on like gambling and video games and stuff like that. I've seen those. I think they're generally positive. I think to the extent to which the purpose of the conversation is like not to like boost his ego or something like that, but if it was really like to educate, and that was the fundamental, like if that's why Richard and I were getting together, was to educate and elucidate and like serve the greater good of the community, I think I'd be for that. So yeah, I'd be for that.
Cool. And that, I would see that as constructive and support that version for sure myself. And I hope again that this has been, a productive chat. I really like Taylor Kennedy's comment here: by giving Hex a handicap and moving the goalpost, an opportunity to educate people on market cap has been completely deferred by Nomics unnecessarily. At the same time, we're able to discuss it. So I think,
I think back to the talking with Richard. I think debating is a skill like any other skill. I think Richard is like 100x better than me about it. So I'm happy to explain how Nomics works, to discuss things in general. I suck at debate. Like I've never been involved in debate. I don't think
it would be a debate though, because you're both truth seekers and public figures. And there's an opportunity here to, I have seen you on here be very open to data and proof. And that is the one thing that the Hex community definitely stands behind is math is math. And so if we find that certain definitions are, having the right data going along with them, then I think everybody wins.
Sounds good. All right, I've got to run.
Thank you so much for joining.
Here. Yeah, thank you as well. And thanks just for being over. Like, let's stay in dialogue. Hexkins, let's stay in dialogue. I'd say, we don't get everything right. Maybe we've gotten something wrong here. Let's keep on communicating, and I'm sure you'll see Nomics evolve over time. Maybe it'll be in a way you like, maybe it won't. But we definitely won't stop engaging and interacting and hearing what you have to say. So I'm gonna,
and everybody, I'm gonna do possibly like a further exploration of this topic with future us, maybe at some point.
Cool.
And then I'm also going to be streaming later with Crypto Heartbeat. So check it out. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And until next time, stake wisely, my friends. Thanks, Clay.
Thank you. Bye.